Captain Jake Morrison stared at the blinking red light on his ship's console. The signal was weak but clear. Someone was in trouble. The human exploration vessel Meridian had been traveling through the outer rim of Council space for 3 weeks, now mapping new trade routes and making contact with alien species. "Captain, we're getting a distress call," said Lieutenant Amy Clark from her station. Her voice was tense. "It's coming from about 2 hours away at full speed." Jake looked at the data on his screen. A civilian transport ship was under attack by raiders. The ship carried over 200 passengers, mostly families traveling between colonies. The attackers had better weapons and faster ships. "How long until the Council response fleet gets there?" Jake asked. Chief Engineer Danny Wright checked his instruments. "The nearest Council patrol is 6 hours out, sir, maybe 7. Jake felt his stomach drop. 6 hours was too long. The civilian ship would be destroyed or captured long before help arrived. He looked around the bridge at his small crew. The Meridian was not a warship. It had light shields and only basic weapons. But it was fast. "Set course for the distress signal," Jake ordered. "Maximum speed." Amy turned in her chair. "Sir, we're not supposed to engage in combat without Council approval. The rules say we should wait for the proper authorities." Jake had read those rules many times. The Galactic Council had very clear policies about military action. Ships were expensive. Crew members were valuable resources. Risking them to help strangers was considered wasteful and stupid. The Council believed in careful planning and cost analysis before any action. "I know the rules," Jake said, "but those people will be dead in 6 hours." The Meridian jumped to faster-than-light speed. The crew prepared for what they knew would be a difficult fight. Danny worked on boosting their shields while Amy checked their weapons systems. The ship's doctor, Helen Park, prepared the medical. For wounded passengers, when they dropped out of hyperspace, Jake saw the attack in progress. 3 raider ships, sleek and deadly, were firing on a large passenger transport. The transport's shields were failing. Pieces of metal floated in space where escape pods had been destroyed. "Open communication channel," Jake ordered. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Meridian," he said into the radio. "Raiders, cease your attack immediately." The response came quickly. The raider captain's voice was full of amusement. "Little human ship, you are far from home. Leave now and we will not harm you." Jake looked at his crew. Amy was scared but determined. Danny was ready at the engineering controls. Helen was monitoring the passenger ship's life signs. Over 100 people were still alive on the transport. "I'm only going to say this once," Jake said. "Let those people go." The raider captain laughed. "Or what? You will fight us. 3 ships against 1? You humans are either very brave or very stupid." "Let's find out," Jake said. The battle was quick and brutal. The Meridian was faster than the raider ships, but they had more firepower. Jake used every trick he knew, diving and weaving between the enemy vessels. Amy managed to disable 1 raider ship with a lucky shot. Danny kept the shields working even as they took heavy damage, but the fight was taking too long. The passenger transport was drifting, its engines dead. Jake could see that it would not survive much longer. "Danny, can you give me more power to the weapons?" Jake asked. "I can, but it will drop our shields to almost nothing," Danny replied. "Do it!" The Meridian's weapons suddenly blazed with increased power. Jake targeted the largest raider ship and fired everything they had. The enemy vessel exploded in a bright flash. The remaining raider ship turned and fled. Jake's crew cheered, but their celebration was short. The Meridian had taken serious damage. 3 crew members were injured, and the ship's hull was cracked in several places. "Get us alongside the transport," Jake ordered. "We need to help those people." For the next 4 hours, the Meridian's crew worked to rescue survivors. They brought over 60 wounded passengers to their ship. Helen worked without rest to treat the injured. Amy and Danny helped repair the transport's life support systems. When the Council response fleet finally arrived, they found both ships limping toward the nearest station. The Council commander, a tall alien called Kethver, was not pleased. "Captain Morrison, Kethver said over the radio. You have violated several council regulations. You engaged in combat without authorization. You risked a valuable ship and crew for unknown persons. Jake was tired and angry. We saved lives. Over 100 people are alive because we acted. And, you lost 3 crew members to injury, Kethver replied. Your ship is damaged and will cost millions to repair. The economic loss is significant. Economic loss? Jake could not believe what he was hearing. We're talking about people's lives. Kethver's voice was cold and logical. Captain, you must understand how things work in council space. Resources are limited. Ships and trained crew are expensive. We cannot risk valuable assets for every distress call. Jake looked at Amy, who was staring at the radio in shock. So you just let people die? We respond when it is practical to do so, Kethver explained. The Council has calculated that immediate response to all distress calls would result in unacceptable losses of ships and personnel. It is better to lose some civilians than to risk military assets. That's murder, Jake said. That is survival, Kethver replied. Your species is new to galactic society. You will learn that emotional responses are inefficient. The galaxy is a dangerous place. We must be logical. When they reached the station, Jake was called to meet with the council representatives. The meeting room was filled with aliens from different species, all wearing the same cold expression. Captain Morrison, said a Corvin merchant, your actions today were reckless and costly. The raider ship you destroyed was worth 12 million credits. The cargo it carried was worth another 8 million. Good, Jake said. I'm glad we cost them money. You do not understand, said another alien. Those raiders pay taxes to the council. They operate under our licenses. Destroying their ship was destruction of council property. Jake felt like he was in a nightmare. You're saying the council works with pirates? We work with anyone who contributes to the galactic economy, the Corvin explained. The raiders provide a service. They remove inefficient shipping operations. Only the strongest and smartest traders survive. What about the passengers they kill? Acceptable losses, said Kethver. The weak are removed from the population. The strong survive and reproduce. This is natural selection. Jake looked around the room at the council members. They all nodded as if this made perfect sense. Where I come from, Jake said, we have a different idea about what makes someone strong. Oh? Asked Kethver. And what is that? Protecting people who cannot protect themselves, Jake replied. Standing up for what is right, even when it costs you something? We call it honor. The council members looked at each other. Several of them made sounds that might have been laughter. Honor, repeated the Corvin merchant. Yes, we have heard of this concept. It is a primitive idea from species that did not survive long in galactic society. Captain Morrison, said Kethver, you will learn that honor is a luxury that evolution cannot afford. The species that survive are those that make practical decisions. The galaxy has no place for heroes, Jake stood up from the table. Then, maybe it's time the galaxy remembered what heroes look like. As he left the meeting room, Jake did not know that his words would soon echo across the stars. The age of cold logic was about to end, and the galaxy would remember what it meant to be truly strong. 3 weeks after the rescue mission, news traveled fast through council space. The story of the human ship that fought raiders to save strangers spread from station to station. Some species thought the humans were crazy. Others began to whisper about something they had not felt in generations: hope. Colonel Lisa Hayes sat in her office on the human military base at Titan Station. Reading reports from across the galaxy, the Council was not happy with humanity's growing reputation. Several human ships had been reassigned to quiet sectors far from any trouble. The message was clear: stay out of Council business. Lisa's communication device buzzed. The message was marked urgent and came from the mining colony at Kepler 7. Colonel Hayes, the voice was panicked. This is Manager Ross at Kepler 7. Our star is going unstable. Solar flares are getting stronger every day. We need immediate evacuation for 8,000 colonists. Lisa checked her star charts. Kepler 7 was in the outer rim, a poor mining world that barely produced enough to pay for its own supplies. The colonists were mostly families who had nowhere else to go. "What does the council say?" Lisa asked. "They ran their calculations," Ross replied. "They say the cost of evacuation would be 40 million credits. The colony only produces 12 million per year. They classified us as a non-essential loss." Lisa felt her blood turn cold. "What does that mean?" "It means they are not coming. They sent us a message saying they regret the situation but cannot justify the expense. They wished us luck." Lisa stared at the message for a long moment. 8,000 people were going to die because saving them would cost too much money. She thought about Jake Morrison and his crew, who had risked everything to save strangers. She thought about the council's cold calculations and their talk of acceptable losses. "How long do you have?" she asked. "Maybe 3 days before the solar flares make the planet uninhabitable," Ross said. 4 days at most. Lisa looked at her files. She had 12 transport ships under her command, along with 200 Marines. The transports were old and slow, but they could carry people. The Marines were trained for dangerous missions. "Ross, start preparing your people for evacuation. Tell them to pack only what they need to survive." "But Colonel," the council said. "Forget what the council said. We are coming to get you." Lisa called her second-in-command, Sergeant Bobby Chun. Bobby had been with her for 5 years and had never backed down from a difficult mission. "Bobby, how fast can we get the transports ready for a long-range evacuation?" Bobby looked at his charts. 6 hours if we push hard." "But Colonel, we don't have authorization for any evacuation mission." "We don't need authorization to save people." Lisa said, "Get the ships ready. Load them with medical supplies and food. We leave in 6 hours. Where are we going?" "Kepler 7. The star is going to kill 8,000 people, and the council thinks it costs too much to save them." Bobby's face went hard. "How many ships do we have?" 12 transports and my command ship. We can carry maybe 600 people per ship if we pack them tight. That's only 7,200 people. The colony has 8,000, Lisa nodded. Then we make 2 trips. Or we figure out how to carry more. Word spread quickly through the human fleet. Within hours, volunteers were lining up to join the mission. Engineers worked around the clock to modify the transport ships, removing unnecessary equipment to make room for more passengers. Medical staff prepared emergency supplies. Marines checked their equipment and prepared for a dangerous mission. Admiral Ruthstone, the commander of the human fleet, called Lisa to her office. "Colonel Hayes, I understand. You are planning an unauthorized evacuation mission." Lisa stood straight. "Yes, Admiral. 8,000 civilians are going to die if we don't act. The Council has specifically forbidden any military action in that sector. They say it interferes with their resource allocation policies. With respect, Admiral, their policies are going to kill children." Admiral Stone was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the reports on her desk, then at Lisa. "How many ships do you need?" 12 transports and my command ship. "Maybe more if we can get them. What about the radiation?" "The solar flares will be dangerous. We have radiation suits. The Marines can handle it." Admiral Stone stood up and walked to the window. Outside, they could see the human ships being prepared for the mission. "Colonel, if you do this, the Council will call it an act of rebellion. They might remove humanity from the Alliance. They might even attack us." "Admiral, if we don't do this, we become just like them. We become the kind of people who let children die to save money." Admiral Stone turned back to Lisa. "What do you need from me?" "Permission to take additional ships. And covering fire if things go wrong. You have both." "But Lisa, this mission is voluntary only. No one goes who doesn't want." "Tio," Lisa smiled. "I don't think that will be a problem." The evacuation fleet left Titan Station 12 hours later. 15 transport ships, 2 medical vessels, and Admiral Stone's command ship. Over 3,000 human volunteers were ready to risk their lives. For people they had never met, the journey to Kepler 7 took 2 days. When they arrived, the situation was worse than expected. The star was throwing massive solar flares every few hours. The radiation levels were deadly. The planet's atmosphere was beginning to burn away. All transports, this is Colonel Hayes. We have maybe 8 hours before this place becomes uninhabitable. We need to work fast. The Marines landed first, wearing heavy radiation suits. Sergeant Bobby Chun led teams through the colony, helping families gather their belongings and get to the landing zones. The work was dangerous and exhausting. The radiation made their equipment fail and their bodies weak. "Colonel," Bobby reported, "over the radio, we have a problem. The radiation is worse than we thought. Our suits are failing after 4 hours of exposure." Lisa looked at the numbers. They had rescued 3,000 people so far. 5,000 were still waiting. How long? Can we stay? Maybe 8 more hours before the Marines start dying from radiation poisoning. Lisa made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. All Marines, continue the mission. We don't leave anyone behind. For the next 8 hours, the humans worked like heroes from ancient stories. Marines carried children through radioactive storms. Engineers kept the transport ships running even as their circuits failed. Medical staff treated radiation sickness while suffering from it themselves. When the last transport ship lifted off from Kepler 7, they had saved 7,600 people. 400 colonists had died before the evacuation began. 3 human transport ships were too damaged to fly and had to be left behind. 67 Marines were suffering from severe radiation poisoning, but they had saved almost everyone. The celebration was short. As the evacuation fleet returned to Council space, they were met by a massive Council war fleet. Admiral Stone found herself facing a tribunal of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "Admiral Stone," said Kethver, "you have committed an act of war against the Council. You interfered with our resource allocation. You violated our authority. You cost us millions of credits." "We saved 8,000 lives," Stone replied. "You saved people who were already classified as losses," said a Corvin merchant. "People who contributed nothing to the galactic economy. You wasted valuable ships and personnel on worthless individuals." Those worthless individuals included 2,000 children. Children who would have grown up to be miners and farmers. Low-value workers. Admiral Stone looked around the tribunal. Every face was cold and calculating. These beings saw people as numbers in a ledger, not as living souls with hopes and dreams. "You want to know why we did it?" Stone asked. "Because a long time ago, humans had warriors called knights. These knights swore to protect the innocent, even if it cost them everything. They believed that some things are worth more than money." "Or safety, knights," repeated Kethver. "Yes, we have heard of this concept. It is a primitive idea." "Maybe," Stone said. "But it's what makes us human. And maybe it's what this galaxy needs to remember." The tribunal was silent for a long moment. Then Kethver spoke again. "Humanity will be restricted to your home system. Any further violations will result in your expulsion from the Council." "So be it," Stone replied. The humans returned to their ships. Word of their defiance spread across the galaxy. On distant worlds, young beings began to dream of something. Their elders had forgotten the idea that some things are worth fighting for, even when victory seems impossible. Dr. Helen Park brushed the dust off the ancient stone, carving with careful hands. She had been working on Proxima Tertius for 3 months, studying the ruins of a civilization that had died out thousands of years ago. The work was slow and difficult. But Helen loved discovering the secrets of the past. The carving was different from anything she had seen before. It showed tall figures in armor standing guard over smaller beings. The armored figures carried shields and weapons, but they were not attacking. They were protecting. "Computer, scan this carving and translate any text," Helen said. The scanner hummed for several minutes. Then words appeared on Helen's screen in perfect English. "Here lie the Valdari Guardians, who gave their lives so that others might live. They knew no fear when facing the darkness, for they carried the light of honor in their hearts." Helen stared at the translation. The Valdari Guardians. She had never heard of them, but the description sounded familiar. It sounded like the stories her grandmother used to tell about knights from old Earth. She moved to another carving. This one showed a great battle, with the armored figures fighting against monsters and demons. The text beneath it read, "The Guardians held the line at the Battle of Seven Suns, though they knew they would not survive. Their sacrifice saved 10 million innocent souls." Helen felt her heart racing. She had found evidence of something the Council claimed never existed in galactic history. Warriors who fought not for profit or survival, but for honor and duty. Over the next few days, Helen explored more of the ruins. She found a library carved into stone, filled with the history of the Veldari Guardians. The stories were amazing and terrible. Warriors who gave up their own lives to save strangers. Soldiers who refused to retreat even when facing impossible odds. Leaders who chose death over dishonor. But the Veldari were not the only ones. Helen found references to other groups across the galaxy. The shimmering defenders of Altair, who had died protecting refugee ships. The shield-bearers of the Outer Rim, who had fought against slavers and pirates. The Golden Guard of Centauri, who had sworn to protect the weak. All of them were gone. All of them had died fighting for others. Helen sent her reports back to human space, but she also sent copies to universities across the galaxy. Within days, her discovery was being discussed on every major world. A council tried to classify the information, but it was too late. The story was already spreading. On Corvin Prime, a young engineer named Zach Toole read Helen's reports with growing excitement. Zach worked in the shipyards, building vessels for the Council's merchant fleet. He had always felt that something was missing from galactic society, but he had never known what. Now he knew. The galaxy had forgotten how to be brave. Zach began meeting with other young Corvin in secret. They called themselves the Protection Guild, and they swore to help others without expecting payment. It started small, fixing broken equipment for poor families, helping elderly Corvin with their shopping, protecting children from bullies, but word of their activities spread. Soon, protection guilds were forming on other Corvin worlds. The older generation was horrified. They saw their children rejecting the values of profit and efficiency for something they called useless sentiment. On Xanthari worlds, the situation was even more dramatic. Young Xanthari military officers began refusing orders that would result in civilian casualties. They quoted Helen's reports about the ancient guardians, saying that true strength came from protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Colonel Vex Carey of the Xanthari Third Fleet was one of the first to openly defy the Council. When ordered to destroy a rebel outpost that was being used as a hospital, he refused. The Veldari Guardians would not have attacked a medical facility, he told his superiors. If we are to call ourselves warriors, we must follow their example. Vex Carey was arrested and put on trial for insubordination. But his trial was broadcast across Xanthari space, and millions of young Xanthari watched him defend his actions. He spoke of honor and duty, of the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak. He quoted the ancient carvings that Helen had found. Our ancestors knew something we have forgotten, Vex Carey said. They knew that survival is not enough. They knew that a life lived without honor is no life at all. The trial ended with Vex Carey's execution, but his words continued to spread. Xanthari military units began showing what the Council called aberrant behavior. They protected civilian populations instead of just following orders. They refused to fire on unarmed protesters. They helped refugees instead of turning them away. The Council was in crisis. The careful order they had built over thousands of years was falling apart. Species that had been obedient for generations were suddenly questioning authority. Young beings across the galaxy were forming groups dedicated to helping others. Captain Jake Morrison, now famous throughout Council space, became a symbol of this new movement. When his ship, the Meridian, was rebuilt, it carried a new flag, a simple white shield on a blue field. Other human ships began flying the same flag. Then ships from other species started using it too. The Council called an emergency session. Representatives from every major species gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. The humans. As spreading a dangerous ideology, said the Corvin Trade Minister. Their ideas about honor and sacrifice are destroying the economic order we have built. It is worse than that, said Kethfer. They are awakening memories that should have stayed buried. The galaxy abandoned the old ways for good reasons. Honor leads to waste. Sacrifice leads to death. These concepts nearly destroyed galactic civilization once before. Admiral Stone was brought before the Council to answer for humanity's actions. She stood alone in the Great Chamber, facing hundreds of alien representatives. Admiral Stone, said the Council President, your species has been in galactic society for less than 50 years. Yet you presume to teach us about morality and ethics. You ignore our wisdom and experience. What wisdom? Stone replied. You have built a galaxy where children die because saving them costs too much. You have created a society where the strong prey on the weak and call it natural law. You have forgotten what it means to be truly civilized. We have created stability, Kethfer said. We have prevented the wars that once destroyed entire species. We have built a system that works. Your system works for you, Stone said, but it fails everyone else. The Valdari Guardians understood something you have forgotten. True strength comes from protecting others, not from exploiting them. The Valdari Guardians are dead, the Council President said. Their ideals died with them. This is proof that honor is a luxury that evolution cannot afford. Stone smiled. The Valdari Guardians are not dead. Their ideals live on in every being who chooses to help others. They live on in every young Corvin who joins a protection guild. They live on in every Xanthari officer who refuses to fire on civilians. They live on in every human who risks their life for strangers. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Some representatives demanded that humanity be expelled from the galaxy. Others wanted human ships destroyed. A few younger representatives tried to defend the human position, but they were shouted down. You have brought chaos to our ordered society, the council president said. You have awakened dangerous ideas that threaten everything we have built. Good, Stone replied. Maybe it's time this galaxy remembered what it means to be honorable. The council voted to brand humanity as a cultural contaminant. Human ships were banned from most sectors. Human trade was restricted. Human ideas were classified as dangerous propaganda, but the damage was already done. Across the galaxy, young beings were learning about the ancient guardians. They were forming new organizations dedicated to helping others. They were refusing to accept the cold logic of the council. The galaxy was waking up from a long sleep, and it was remembering what it had lost. The stars were learning what nights were, and they were deciding that honor was worth fighting for. The age of cold calculation was ending. The age of heroes was about to begin. The Council's corporate fleet surrounded the human colony of New Houston like a pack of wolves. 200 warships hung in space around the small world, their weapons aimed at the cities below. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Fleet. Commander Seth Murphy stood on the bridge of the human defense station, watching the enemy ships position themselves for attack. New Houston was home to 3 million humans, including many families with children. The colony had been humanity's first major settlement outside Earth's solar system. Commander Murphy, the radio crackled with the voice of Council Admiral Leckmore, you have 1 hour to surrender. All humans will be relocated to re-education facilities where they will learn to abandon their dangerous ideas about honor and sacrifice. Seth looked at the tactical display. The human defense fleet had only 30 ships, most of them converted cargo vessels with basic weapons. They were completely outgunned. This is Commander Murphy, he replied. New Houston will not surrender. We will not abandon our principles. Then you will die for them, Leckmore said. Your choice. Mayor Karen Lopez joined Seth on the bridge. She was a small woman in her 50s, but her eyes were full of determination. Commander, my people are ready to evacuate to the shelters, but we won't leave our world without a fight. Ma'am, we can't win this battle, Seth said. They have Too many ships. Maybe we can't win, Karen replied. But we can show the galaxy what humans are willing to die for. Seth nodded. He understood. Sometimes the most important battles were the ones you couldn't win. Sometimes you had to fight just to prove that some things were worth fighting for. All ships, this is Commander Murphy. Prepare for battle. We stand for New Houston. But as the human ships moved to defensive positions, something unexpected happened. New contacts appeared on the radar. Ships were coming out of hyperspace, but they weren't Council vessels. The first ships to arrive were Corvin traders flying modified cargo haulers. Their hulls were painted with the white shield symbol that had become the mark of the new chivalric movement. Behind them came more ships, Xanthari military vessels that had gone rogue, small craft from dozens of species that Seth had never seen before. "This is Captain Zach Toole of the Corvin Protection Guild," came a voice over the radio. "We stand with New Houston." "This is Colonel Vexnari of the Free Xanthari Fleet," said another voice. "We will not let the Council destroy innocent people." More ships kept arriving. Old vessels and new ones, military craft and civilian ships that had been converted for fighting. They came from every corner of the galaxy, all flying the white shield banner. Seth stared at the display in amazement. "How many ships do we have now?" 147, reported his tactical officer. "And more are arriving every minute." Admiral Vekmar was not pleased. "Unknown vessels, you are interfering with a Council police action. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Chivalric Order," came a familiar voice. Seth smiled. Morrison had survived the destruction of his first ship and was now flying a new vessel called the Meridian II. "We don't recognize the Council's authority to attack innocent people." "Morrison," Vekmar said, "you are responsible for this chaos. Your human ideas have infected the galaxy like a disease." "If wanting to protect the innocent is a disease," Morrison replied, "then I hope it spreads to every world in the galaxy." The battle lines were drawn. The Council's corporate fleet on one side, the mixed volunteer fleet on the other. Seth realized that this was more than just a fight for New Houston. This was a battle for the soul of galactic civilization. "All ships," Seth broadcast on the volunteer fleet frequency. "This is Commander Murphy. We're fighting for more than just one world today. We're fighting for the right to choose honor over profit, courage over safety. We're fighting for the idea that some things are worth dying for." The battle began with the Council fleet firing on the outer defensive positions. The volunteers fought back with everything they had. Corvin cargo ships rammed Council destroyers. Xanthari fighters dove into the enemy formations with suicidal courage. Human ships used their speed and maneuverability to strike at the larger vessels, but the fighting was not limited to space. On worlds across the galaxy, the oppressed populations rose up. The news of the battle at New Houston had spread quickly, inspiring beings who had suffered under Council rule for generations. On Corvin Prime, the young members of the Protection Guild seized the government buildings. They declared that they would no longer follow the old ways of greed and exploitation. Similar uprisings happened on dozens of Corvin worlds. The Xanthari military split in half. Young officers followed the example of the executed Colonel Vexcary, refusing to fire on civilian populations. They turned their weapons on their own commanders who tried to suppress the rebellions. Even species that had been quiet for centuries began to act. The crystal beings of Altair, who had not spoken to outsiders for 1,000 years, sent a message of support to the volunteers at New Houston. The plant creatures of the Outer Rim began attacking Council installations on their worlds. The galaxy was in revolution, and it had all started with humanity's simple idea that protecting others was worth any sacrifice. Back at New Houston, the battle raged for hours. The volunteer fleet fought with desperate courage, but they were still outnumbered. Ships were destroyed on both sides. The space around the colony was filled with debris and the bodies of the dead. Seth's defense station took heavy damage. Half his crew was dead or wounded. The station's shields were failing and enemy fire was getting through. "Commander," his communications officer reported, We're getting a message from Admiral Stone. She's leading a relief fleet from human space. How far away? 6 hours, sir. Seth looked at the tactical display. They didn't have 6 hours. The volunteer fleet was being destroyed. The Council ships were moving closer to the planet. All ships, he broadcast. This is Murphy. We've done all we can. Any ship that wants to retreat should do so now. No one will think less of you, the response surprised him. Not a single ship left the battle line. Commander Murphy, said Captain Morrison, we didn't come here to run away. We came here to stand for something. The Corvin Protection Guild does not retreat, said Zaktul. The Free Zenthari choose death before dishonor, said Vexnari. Seth felt tears in his eyes. These beings from different species, different worlds, different cultures were all united by the same simple idea that some things were worth dying for, but just as the situation looked hopeless, new contacts appeared on the radar. Ships were coming out of hyperspace, but these were different from anything Seth had seen before. They were ancient vessels, designs that hadn't been used for thousands of years. This is Captain Velcari of the Valdari Remnant, came a voice. That sounded like music? We have slept for 3,000 years, but the call to arms has awakened us. This is Commander Sildar of the Shimmering Defenders, said another voice. We thought we were the last of our kind, but we see that honor. Lives on, the ancient ships moved into battle formation. They were old, but they were powerful. More importantly, they carried the crews that had kept the old ways alive in secret, waiting for the day when the galaxy would remember what it meant to be heroic. The tide of battle turned. The Council fleet found itself facing not just volunteers, but the legendary guardians of galactic history. The same warriors they had claimed were extinct were fighting alongside humans and other species, who had embraced the ancient ideals. Admiral Thekmar's voice came over the radio, filled with fear and confusion. This is impossible. The old guardians are dead. They died out millennia ago. Reports of our death, said Captain Velcari, were greatly exaggerated. We have been waiting for this day when the galaxy would remember what we fought for. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Council fleet, but with their retreat. Many Council ships simply stopped fighting and requested permission to join the volunteer fleet. Their crews had been inspired by the courage they witnessed as the Council forces withdrew. Seth looked at the mixed fleet that had defended New Houston, ships from dozens of species, all united by the simple idea that protecting others was worth any risk. This is just the beginning, he said to Morrison over the radio. The galaxy is waking up. Yes, Morrison replied. And it's remembering what it means to be truly strong. The Celestial Nexus was the heart of Council space, a massive space station that had been the center of galactic government for over 5,000 years. Admiral Ruth Stone looked at it through the window of her flagship and felt the weight of history. Today, everything would change. The combined fleet that followed Stone into the Nexus system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside ancient Valdari vessels. Corvin Protection Guild fighters formed up with rebel Zenthari destroyers. Species that had been enemies for centuries now fought side by side under the White Shield banner. Admiral, reported Captain Morrison from his position in the fleet, we count over 3,000 ships in the Council Defense Fleet. They're formed up around the Nexus station. Stone nodded. The Council had gathered every ship they could find for this final battle. Corporate security vessels, planetary defense fleets, even some old warships that had been in storage for decades. They knew this was their last chance to stop the revolution. All ships, Stone broadcast to her fleet, remember what we're fighting for? We're not here to conquer or destroy. We're here to free the galaxy from the cold logic that values profit over life. The battle began as soon as Stone's fleet entered weapons range. The Council ships opened fire with everything they had. The space around the Nexus lit up with energy, beams and missile explosions, but something strange happened as the battle progressed. Individual Council ships began breaking formation and switching sides. The crews of these vessels had watched the revolution spread across the galaxy. They had seen their own people rise up against the old ways. They had heard the stories of the ancient guardians and the human ideas about honor and duty. "This is Captain Mordell of the Council Destroyer." "Profit margin," came a voice over the radio. "We request permission to join the Revolutionary Fleet." "This is Commander Jackvies of the security vessel Market Force. We stand with the Revolution." More and more council ships turned against their own fleet. Some of them had been built by Corvin, who were now part of the Protection Guild. Others were crewed by young Zenthari who had been inspired by the executed Colonel Vexcary, Admiral Vecmur. Commanding the council defense was desperate. "All ships, any vessel that defects will be destroyed. We will not tolerate treason." But it was too late. The council fleet was falling apart from within. Ship after ship switched sides until the revolutionaries actually outnumbered the loyalists. In the middle of the chaos, a new ship appeared on the scanners. It was the Meridian, Captain Morrison's original vessel that everyone thought had been destroyed. But it had been rebuilt and upgraded, and it carried special passengers. "This is Captain Morrison," came the familiar voice. "I have representatives from every species in the galaxy aboard my ship. They want to speak to the council." Morrison's ship flew directly toward the Nexus station, ignoring the weapons fire around it. Somehow, it reached the station's docking bay without being destroyed. On the station, the council members gathered in their great chamber for what they knew might be their final meeting. The revolution had spread to almost every world in their territory. Their own fleets were switching sides. Their carefully ordered galaxy was falling apart. "The humans have destroyed everything we built," said the Corvin Trade Minister. 5,000 years of progress, ruined by their primitive ideas about honor. "Perhaps," said Kethfer, "it is time to consider that we were wrong." The other council members stared at him in shock. Kethfer had been one of the strongest supporters of the old ways. "I have been reading the reports from the archaeological expedition," Kethfer continued. "The ancient guardians, the ones the humans call knights, they built a civilization too. It lasted for 10,000 years before we replaced it with our system. And it fell," said another council member. "That proves our way is better. Did it fall?" Kethfer asked. "Or did we simply convince ourselves that survival was more important than honor? Did we choose to forget what made life worth living?" The debate was interrupted when Captain Morrison and his passengers entered the chamber. They were representatives from every major species, Corvin engineers, Zenthari soldiers, even some of the ancient guardians who had emerged from hiding. "Council members," Morrison said, "we're not here to destroy you. We're here to offer you a choice." "What choice?" asked the council president. "The choice to remember what you used to be," said Captain Velcari of the Velgari remnant. "Your ancestors were guardians too before they forgot their purpose," Morrison stepped forward. "The galaxy doesn't have to be ruled by fear and greed. It can be guided by honor and courage. We can build a society where the strong protect the weak, where helping others is more valuable than making profit." "Impossible," said the Corvin Trade Minister. "Resources are limited. We cannot afford to waste them on sentiment." "Resources are only limited if you waste them on the wrong things," said Zaktul of the Corvin Protection Guild. "We have enough for everyone if we share instead of hoarding." The debate continued for hours. Outside the station, the battle had stopped. Both fleets waited to see what would happen in the council chamber. Finally, the council president stood up. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A new government," Morrison said. "The Galactic Chivalric Alliance?" "Every species gets a voice, but decisions are made based on what helps the most people, not what makes the most money." "And if we refuse?" Morrison looked around the chamber. "Then you'll be removed from power by your own people. The revolution is already won. The only question is whether you want to be part of building something better, or if you want to be remembered as the leaders who chose greed over hope." One by one, the council members began to vote. Some voted to fight to the end. Others voted to accept the new order. But the majority voted to step down and allow new elections. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took months for the new government to form. There were problems and disagreements. Some worlds tried to keep the old ways. Some species had to learn how to trust each other again, but slowly, the galaxy began to change. The Corvin Protection Guilds became official rescue services. The Zenthari military became peacekeepers instead of enforcers. Trade routes that had been controlled by corporations became open to everyone. Captain Morrison was elected as the first Grand Knight of the Alliance, not because he conquered anyone, but because every species in the galaxy voted for him. He stood in the same chamber where the old council had met, but now it was filled with representatives who had sworn to protect the innocent and serve others before themselves. "We have remembered what the galaxy forgot," Morrison said in his acceptance speech. "We have remembered that true strength comes from helping others, not from exploiting them. We have remembered what knights are." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for all those who had died during the revolution. Admiral Stone thought about the Marines, who had suffered radiation poisoning to save the colonists at Kepler 7. She thought about Colonel Vex Carey, who had been executed for refusing to attack civilians. She thought about all the beings who had chosen honor over safety on the wall behind. Morrison's podium was a memorial listing the names of every person who had died fighting for the revolution. At the top of the list were the names of the ancient guardians who had kept the old ways alive. At the bottom were the names of humans who had reminded the galaxy what heroism looked like. The last name on the list was simply marked Unknown Knight. It was there to remember all the beings throughout history who had chosen to protect others, even when no one would remember their names. Years later, when children across the galaxy learned about the revolution, they would learn about courage and honor. They would learn that some things are worth fighting for, even when victory seems impossible. They would learn that the strongest people are those who use their strength to help others. The stars had remembered what knights were, and they would never forget again.